Today, we're diving deep into the intense world of forensic psychiatry. This is that critical, fascinating place where the complexities of the human mind slam right into the rigid structures of the law. And believe me, the results can change lives forever.
So, think about this for a second. What actually happens when the mind itself is what's on trial? We're not just talking about whether someone is guilty or innocent, we're talking about the mental state behind the action. And that's a question that puts our entire justice system to the ultimate test.
Now, before we can even begin to answer that, we first need to get a handle on the specialized field that's designed to tackle this head-on. So let's define what we're actually talking about when we mix the mind, the law, and medicine together.
So, what is it exactly? Well, at its core, forensic psychiatry is basically the bridge between two completely different worlds. It takes all that medical knowledge about the mind and applies it to legal questions. A forensic psychiatrist isn't just a doctor, they're kind of like an expert witness for the mind, helping the court understand the psychology of everyone involved. And if you're wondering just how badly this is needed, get this. A huge survey in India found that nearly 80%, that's almost 8 out of every 10 prisoners, has a diagnosed mental illness or a substance use disorder. This isn't some small issue, it's a massive systemic crisis, and it just goes to show how vital this field really is. Okay, so let's step inside the courtroom. This is where the stakes are at their absolute highest. This is the arena where a forensic psychiatrist's opinion can literally change everything. It can determine guilt, innocence, and the entire course of a person's life.
And here's the thing you've got to understand. Insanity is a legal term, not a medical one. So how on earth does the law even begin to define it? Well, courts have been wrestling with this for centuries, and that struggle has led to some pretty important legal tests.
This quote here from the Monoghan Rules all the way back in 1843 really gets to the heart of it. The question it asks is surprisingly simple. Because of a mental illness, did the person actually know what they were doing, and did they know it was wrong? This rule from the 19th century, believe it or not, still shapes the insanity defense all over the world.
But hold on. Before a court can even think about someone's mental state at the time of the crime, there's a much more immediate question. Is this person mentally fit to stand trial right now? This is all about making sure the legal process is fair from the very start. And here's how they figure that out in practice. They use something called the Pritchard criteria, which is basically a checklist for the forensic psychiatrist. Simple but crucial questions. Can the defendant understand what they're being charged with? Can they actually help their own lawyer? If the answer to questions like these is no, then the trial has to be put on hold.
But the job isn't just about figuring out what's going on with the accused. A forensic psychiatrist has this profound duty of care to protect all the vulnerable people who get caught up in the legal system.
You see, just like all doctors, psychiatrists are held to a professional standard, and if they fail, they can be found negligent. To prove it, you have to show these 4 things, what they call the 4 Ds. There was a duty of care, there was a dereliction or a breach of that duty, that breach caused real damage, and there was a direct causation linking the two.
And this is where things get incredibly tricky. Patient confidentiality is a sacred thing in medicine. But what happens if a patient makes a credible threat to hurt someone else? That's when this thing called the duty to warn kicks in, forcing the psychiatrist to walk this impossible tightrope between their patient's privacy and public safety.
Okay, let's get into the most controversial part of this whole field. We're talking about the search for truth, where modern science and technology enter the picture, and honestly, they raise as many questions as they answer.
I mean, really, can science read a mind to find out what's true? It sounds like something straight out of a sci-fi movie, but investigators have been trying to do exactly that for decades, and their efforts had led to some very, very controversial techniques.
First up, the old classic, the polygraph, the lie detector. It measures things like your blood pressure and heart rate, working on the assumption that lying causes physical stress. The problem? You know what else causes physical stress? Being nervous because you're strapped to a machine and being accused of a crime. That's why its reliability is so fiercely debated.
Then you've got narcoanalysis, or what everyone calls truth serums. The idea is to lower a person's inhibitions so it's harder for them to make up a lie. But it's a really risky and unreliable process, and you'll almost never see the results hold up in court.
And finally, there's the most futuristic-sounding one of all, brain mapping. This technique actually measures a suspect's brainwaves to see if their brain recognizes specific details of a crime, details that, in theory, only the person who was actually there would know.
So, with all this wild tech, what does the law actually have to say? Well, the Supreme Court of India has been very clear. You cannot force these tests on anyone. They require consent. And, crucially, their results can only ever be used as supporting evidence, not as standalone proof of guilt.
And that really brings us to the heart of it all. Forensic psychiatry isn't just about solving crimes or using fancy gadgets. At its core, it's about this incredibly delicate, difficult balancing act between the hunt for justice and the protection of basic human rights.
So here's the bottom line. The real work is about bringing humanity and science into a system that's often just focused on punishment. It's about ensuring fairness, it's about protecting the vulnerable, and it's about building a justice system that tries to understand, not just to condemn.
And so, at the end of the day, we're left with this one final, vital question. In our relentless pursuit of justice, how do we make sure we don't lose sight of our own humanity? Forensic psychiatry operates right at the center of that question, constantly reminding us all to keep those scales balanced.